Hi everyone. This is going to be part 5 of the reading of the Sybil's, the first prophetess of Mami Wata. If you haven't seen the previous video, it will be linked down in the description box. There's also a playlist on the channel where you can watch all of the previous videos in this series. Let me tell people that I'm on here. My sinuses are killing me. Let's see. I feel like I'm overtasked out. I'm just doing so many things at one time. I can't stand managing socials. Somebody please timestamp this video also for when I start talking or when I start reading. This weather is absurd. Okay, y'all, I wanted to get on here days ago, but I couldn't because I wasn't feeling that well. So, but I hope that gave people an opportunity to catch up on the last 1, 2, 3, 4 videos. Once again, you can get this book off of Amazon. This is just one of the books that I'll be reading here on this channel. I have a list of I have a list of literature that I want to go through on this channel, but then we're also diving into some things on my Patreon that are more occult-like. I also have readings on my Patreon. All of my 18 plus readings are on my Patreon, and then I have some self-focused readings on there as well. So yeah, that's what I've been working on, but I couldn't get on here as soon as I wanted to because your girl got sick and I still don't feel the best. But today we are going to get through, let's see, we're almost through with this book. We're on page 64 and I'm going to stay on here for at least an hour. So let's see how far we can get. we might be able to finish this book in like another video. Yeah. Okay, so historical Sybil's priestesses of Mami. Sybil, prophetess, misclassified simply as female figure. Her arms close to her heart and bodice, meaning that she is keeper of the mysteries. This is Greek Archaica 650 BCE, the Louvre, Paris. Know them by name. Many of these dates cannot be confirmed and seem to contradict either the era of nations and rulers or simply are too far in ancient history to be connected with any recordable event. So much of what remains of the lives of the Sybil's are from secondary and tertiary sources. The Catholic Church and its revisionist writers have harbored a monopoly on these African high priestesses since they seized total power and oversaw the destruction of their mystery schools, temples, and libraries. However, this should by no means invalidate who they are and their absolute critical and historical significance in linking African divine spirit throughout the fabric of all world history. What is also certain is that the African divine spirit that guided them rests in the blood and ancestral soul of all African people. The ancient tradition still exists in the Mami Isis, Mami Watas, and others in West Africa and the diaspora. Just as there were many male prophets during ancient times, but only a few were distinguished from amongst them, this same tradition held true of the Sybil's. Although they maintain grand temples to Mami and the ancestral oracular solar sun serpent deity, and their divine words, prophecies, and wisdom was quoted, honored, and revered all throughout the ancient world, less than a dozen were elevated to renowned status during any given time period. Plato, Justin, and Aristophanes tells us that the Sybil's were not a few, all of them embracing the same prophetic life, and for some particular reason, they all chose the appellation of Sybil's, a tradition by the inhabitants which came down to them from their African ancestors. However, the identity of literally hundreds of these original divine African goddesses will never be known. Their prophecies and history stolen and plagiarized, their African statues and faces destroyed or deliberately obscured, many overlaid with fake Arab, Greek, and Roman images reflecting centuries of foreign invasions, cultural theft, and hostile occupations. Although the Sybil's were known to the non-African ancient world only as prophetesses, all throughout ancient Africa, they were revered as divine. The great mother healers, diviners, and sages who literally gave birth to the gods and aligned their people to their own personal destiny, divinity, and to their ancestors. The Sybil's were descendants of the first prehistoric matrilineal order of so-called serpent-worshipping clans, of whom all African queens and queen mothers in the ecclesiastical order of priestesses and diviners, healers, artisans, and stone builders were born. It was these warrior queens who fled in droves from Libya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Nubia, southern Syria, and Babylon into Asia Minor, Ionia, and ancient Mycenae to join their African and Dravidian sisters who had already established a new home for the African goddess after the Great Flood. This is the story of Noah, y'all. This is the original story of Noah and the ark that had to be built. In the New World, during transatlantic slavery, it was the descendants of these women and male priests and devotees who jumped into the oceans rather than serve another wave of colonial invaders. Just as in modern day Mami Wata Vodun tradition, the Sybil's honored as Tobi, Amagasi, Hunan, Mama, Queen, Mother, etc., were high priestesses. The majority were even married and bore children, and most were required to be over the age of 50. This tenet came after the rape of a very young Sybil priestess some centuries ago at the shrine in Delphi. Afterwards, it was decreed that they must all be past their childbearing years. The historical fact was unknown to later church revisionists when they began concealing and obscuring the Sibyl's African identity by referring to them as white, chaste, youthful virgins. In ancient Greece, the Sibyls were also known as Pythia, Pythoness, and Pythians because of the presence of the ancestral father python serpent. The most ancient of the shrines were at Delos. It was claimed to be where the Black Diana, as Artemis, was born, and later, after the seeds of her temples, Apollo and Zeus's names were added to the list as their original birth home. The following Sibyls being described are also historically listed based upon the country in which they were born or where they were said to have prophesied. Depending upon which location and the deity of which they served, the name Sybil might be phonetically changed into Sybil or Sile or and Heli Eli for the males. Some of the African male prophets have even been called Tamuri, Tamare, Tamoris to denote the sacred temple located at the foot of the mountain Thesprotia, located in northwest Greece near the river Achron, Achron. The sacred river Achron, or River of Woe, was the historic location of one famous carving of the Sibyls, one famous cave-in of the Sibyls who called up the souls of the dead. It was later demonized by the Roman populace and reclassified as one of the so-called 5 rivers of Hades. The name Tamuris, associated with the African order of sun priests, will later be corrupted into the English Thomas, the apostle, whose prophecies, just as the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilee, and the book of Solomon, the Ascentio Moses, and others have been denounced and excluded from the Bible by the Roman populace as heresy. I don't know. I didn't make a post about this on Patreon, but I did say something about this on Threads. If y'all not following me on Threads, where I was talking about the Book of Solomon, and the more you read the Book of Solomon and some scriptures for context that you can find in the Book of Kings, Solomon, everything in that book is basically telling you about the destruction of these temples, or how everybody was being forced to let go of their idol gods, or let go of their mother gods, the spirits of the land, of their ancestors, of their mothers. All of these idol worshippers had to like hand over their idols and convert to these other idols that were basically idols that were sun gods that the men had moved up in hierarchy on the pantheon. Okay, so damn, it's really crazy because when you read the Book of Solomon, you start to realize, oh, he's just talking about, when he's talking about all of these wives, they're spirits. They're all the spirits that he has pacts with because he was an occultist and because he was in mysteries and he was in traditions and he took on these other gods because he was forced to. It was for political reasons. He never really surrendered the customs of where he came from. He loved foreign women. Yeah, he loved foreign women because they were still practicing. People, it took a long time for people to completely abandon what we have been doing since the beginning. Referencing the Great Mother that's our natural, that's what we've been doing since the beginning. So it took a long time for people to let go of the ancestral connection that they have to the land and to the spirits that they inherited through their bloodline or through their mother. And that is what a lot of these books in the Bible are talking about. When they're talking about foreigners and idols and all of this other stuff. And the Book of Solomon is one of the books that the Roman Populace denounced and made sure it wasn't in their holy, canonized, situation. Okay, so the inherent benefit of this brief overview and chronology of the Sybil's is that it offers the contemporary reader a global overview of the African matriarchal presence and enormous influence they wielded in the ancient world. Their great impact has always far exceeded the limited physical, cultural, geographical, and political designations of which Africa and the spiritual roles of which African women in particular are confined today. I'm also thinking about the fact that people thought Solomon was such a wise king, and to some degree, I guess you could say he was strategic and he had wisdom through a lot of experiences. But Solomon said that he credited all of his works to the spirits and the keys of Solomon, all of the spiritual aspect of him, because he was a practicing occultist. All of those spirits were like mother spirits. And once again, it's like you see how women were supporting the patriarchy and they didn't know. It's kind of weird because it's like they knew that it was happening, but they didn't have a choice but to participate in this. This was a really chaotic time in history. Like, I don't even think we can really fathom it or consider it. But this was a chaotic time in history. The Sybil's, a brief overview. Cumea, 3364 BCE, Herophile, meaning deer, initiated to the Mami goddess Hera. Herophile, I think I'm saying that right, is claimed to be from a province in Asia Minor, Turkey, known as Cumea. She was known by several names: Almathea, Phomonea, Herapila, and Europa, from which Europe derives its name. She was also known as Demophile and the Demo. However, some historians suspect these to be the names of other Sybil's. Cumea is also claimed to be the Palestinian Sabe, Cushite, or Black Sybil. She is one of the oldest and first of the two black doves, claiming to be the daughter or daughter-in-law of Onus, whom they actually called Loa, Loa, and present day Christians called Noah. She is one of the oldest and first of the two black doves, claiming to be the daughter in law of present day Noah. That's interesting because Loa also makes me think about voodoo and the Loa. Cumea was a high priestess of the Mami deity Hera, meaning lady protectress, who under African patriarchy, I have to study her, was later paired with as the sister wife of the thunder god Zeus. Cumea lived in a cave during the time of Roman Tarquin the Elder. She is said to have also lived on the island of Samos and to have traveled extensively throughout Asia Minor, Turkey. At Delphi during patriarchal occupation of the temples, Cumea is said to have sung endlessly to her sacred deity installed in the sacred Amphi. In one of her favorite epitaphs, she sang, I, Sybil, Phobos' wise woman, am hidden under a stone monument. I was speaking virgin but voiceless, in this manacle by the strength of fate. I lie close to the nymphs, Mami, and to Hermes, and have not lost my sovereignty. The above song is a chant of political and spiritual protest, making direct reference to the takeover of the Sybil temples by the priests of Ammon, or Amen, Apollo, another sun god. In the above song, she is declaring where her true power and divine authority rests, meaning with Mami and Hermes, the healer and opener of roads. She also makes reference to the African ancestress title of Phoebo or Phoebe, meaning moon. It is one of the sacred names of the Black Diana, and an honorary title held by all Sybil's. However, Apollo's priests, having made the divine son equal to that of the mother, declared this same title for themselves by altering it to the masculine Phoebos or Phoebus, Phoebus. As high priestess of the underworld, one of Cumea's forms of divination was with the sacred laurel leaf. She would write her prophecies on laurel leaves and leave them for the wind to scatter and fall into their own random order at the entrance of her cave. In one account, Cumea reportedly gathered 9 of her books and marched into town and presented them to the first Afro-Etruscan king of Rome, Tarquin. And I think I looked him up because I'm reading this like, I've read this book before, kind of read through it because it kind of reads like a history book or history textbook. And I feel like I looked up Tarquin. He was a terrible person. When you look into the Etruscans, specifically the Afro-Etruscans, they're responsible for building the infrastructure of Rome. It says, for a price of 300 gold pieces, he now Christianized, casted dispersion upon her as a poor black heathen, and refused to purchase them. Angered, Cumea promptly set ablaze 3 of the sacred books of prophecies and represented the remainder, demanding the same price. Again, Tarquin refused. Again, Cumea proceeded to burn 3 more of her prophetic books, and again demanded the same price for the last remaining 3. Shocked and disturbed by Kume's persistence and mere audacity, Tarquin immediately consulted the Arbors, the black diviners. The diviners admonished him for his disrespect of the great prophetess and demanded that he quickly purchase the remaining 3 books. He done disrespected one of the great mother's prophetess. This Tarquin promptly did, and after examining them, he soon realized their great significance. According to the Roman historian Kweeni, those remaining 3 prophetic books were held in such high esteem that they were placed in the capital, protected by 15 guards appointed by Tarquin. Kume's prophetic texts were only consulted in national crisis, and special permission, though never granted, had to be obtained to view them. Tarquin sent emissaries all over the Black world, visiting the heathen shrines of the Sybil's, now scattered throughout the Roman-appointed African ghettos, to gather any remaining books. By then, the Jews, the Hebrews, were already plagiarizing or making their own propaganda, passing them off as the authentic Sibylline oracles. What is being implied here is that these prophetic books of the Sybil's became the sole and undisputed precursor to the Western Christian Bible. The prophecies, oracles, and revelations of the Sybil's were systemically retrieved, purchased, stolen, and haphazardly collected by various means all throughout the ancient world where their temples existed. So basically, there's so many books that we have lost. But what she is saying is that the Torah, the books of the Bible, the Abrahamic texts pretty much come from the Sibylline prophecies, although the Sibylline prophecies that we have translated now are nowhere near the original work. It's been plagiarized and revised and altered. So, many books were later plagiarized, revised, or altered and compiled into one holy book known as the Sibylline Oracles. Those books that were used to compile what is known today as the Judeo-Christian Bible were then credited exclusively to male prophets, or its author listed simply as unknown. To further conceal the identity of its true authors, the gender of God was changed from feminine to masculine. Originally, within each prophetic verse, it is claimed the Sybil's made praises to Mami as Our Lady, and proclaimed that she was greater than any other god in the world. Those books for which it was hard to conceal their African matriarchal origins were simply destroyed or relegated to heresy. Roman Senator Cicero, the orator, writes that the last 3 books of Kume's were deliberately burned in a fire by the Roman governor Stilicon the tyrant. Isn't it crazy how they were just like in the world proud to be known as these tyrannical, cutthroat rulers? Like, it's weird. Okay. Anyways, am I skipping a page? I'm stay focused because I don't want to be on here past a certain time. Okay, so Stilicon was eternally hated by all of Rome for this sacrilegious act, which prompted a universal reflection from poets, scholars, and musicians alike. So worshipped was the Sybil of Cumea that she was immortalized in one of her appellations, Europa, for which Europe is allegedly named. Lydian traveler and geographer Pausanias is said to have written that upon Cumea's death, her ashes were kept in an urn at the temple of Apollo. Erythraean, Ethiopian Sybil. This Sibyl's name is recorded by Greek historians as Eryphile or Erythrian. According to the Greeks, Erythrian refers to the ancient name for the Indian Ocean. Its location being where one of the temples from which this Sibyl's either worked, its location being where one of the temples from which this Sybil either worked or was born. This Ethiopian Sybil was also one of the most famous known prophetess from the Delphi shrine located in now biblical Ephesus. Eryphile is further reputed to be one of the oldest Sibyls from Africa. So old, in fact, that she is claimed to be the actual daughter-in-law of Noah and a crowned priestess of the Mami deity Artemis, the Black Diana. Eryphile is also recorded as the second of the two black doves who was sent to find dry land and to found the holy oracle shrines at Delphi and Dodona. According to Greek historian and philosopher Strabo, Eryphile was one of the inspired and prophetic African women among the ancients. We are told that when Eryphile, is it Eryphile or Eryphile? I don't know. Eryphile first came out as an initiated prophetess. She foretold everyone's destiny, referring to them by name. She foretold what should befall them and delivered it in a verse, and after some time she recovered her human form again. According to Afro-Greek historian Apollodorus, who was then a native of Ionia, Eryphile foretold of the Greeks' invasion of Ethiopian Tauri and predicted their military success. She also foretold that the Greek poet Homer would someday write a number of books of fiction. She admonished him in advance of what he would do once the Greeks became firmly established in ancient Troy. She predicted that he would build his literary career by studying and then plagiarizing her prophetic words, and by copying her poetic style, claiming it as his own. Eryphile's prediction came true when Homer published his famous poem, The Odyssey, hailed as the first great work of Western literature. These two poems, based on Afro-Grecian gods and religious culture, set the standard for Western epic poetry. So descended upon were the prophetic verses of the African Sybil that the Roman Senate reportedly sent 15 ambassadors to the city where Eryphile remained to obtain her verses, to place them in the Roman capital. The above information is all that remains of the life of Eryphile. There is no current record of how Eryphile's life ended. Hellespontica, 500 BCE. Hellespontica is said to have been born in the Trojan war camp called Marmeso during the reign of Cyrus, the king of Persia or Iran. The Persians, who envied and despised the Egyptians and Ethiopians, finally captured many of their major Grecian and other Mediterranean colonies, enslaving its black inhabitants and forcing many into camps. The Persians were alleged to have taken Hellespontica's extraordinary praises for the Black Diana, or Isis, and put them in the mouth of the Virgin Mary, known as the Afro-Asian ancient world to be of a factitious Western concept. The above information is all that remains on the life of Hellespontica. Her ancient depiction was one of an elderly black woman carrying sheaves of corn as the Ethiopian Mami deity Kore, or Kore, I don't know, it's Kore. There is no current record of how Hellesponsika's life ended. Samia. Samia is said to be from the Grecian islands of Samos, one of the earliest settlements of the Black Libyan matriarchal clans who immigrated here around 2500 BCE. Samia was also known as Herophila. She was said to have lived during the time of the Black Roman king Numa Pompilius. She is quoted by early Roman writers such as Sozomino, Sudas, Nicephorus. There is no current record of how Samia's life ended. I want to say this is Phrygia. I'm going to look it up because I really don't want to say it wrong. Phrygia, Phrgia, Phrgia. The Phrygians. Is that how you say it? In Turkey. Phrygia. Okay, the Phrygia. Phrygia was a high priestess of the Black Diana, Artemis, or Sybil. She, as her name implies, was claimed to be a Phrygian, one of the indigenous Black Proto-Elamite clans of Asia Minor. Her mother was said to be Dardanus, and her father was a Black Turkish king named Neso. Phrygia lived in the small city of Ancyra and was said to be prophesying at or sometimes before the era of King Solomon. Phrygia is credited with the same miracles and prophecies of her predecessors. Depending on who's writing the history, she is also claimed to be the first. There is no current record of how her life ended. Libyan Sybil of 2815 BCE. Her name is given by Franciscan monks, her chief rivals as Babisa or Elisa. Probably Eliza, I don't know. There is no known record of how Babisa worked, nor how she lived. However, what is recorded is that centuries later, Babisa's prophetic verses would be badly plagiarized and corrupted by Pope Sixtus, namely. Pope Sixtus the fifth, namely? I don't know. The usual altering of the Sibyl's prophetic words and spiritual works, and crediting them to her own Christian prophets and their Christ. In one alteration, Sixtus places into the mouth of Babisa that a Christian savior would come and heal the sick, make the blind see, the lame walk. The obvious flaw with this is that these miracles the Sibyls themselves did and had been doing for centuries. Sixtus further has Babisa prophesying that this Savior would recline his sacred limbs on the lap and arms of the Queen of Heaven. This attribute is only given to the Queen Mother, Priestess, that's Mother Isis, and Prophetess of Mami Isis, known by her many names, most notably in ancient Greece as the Black Diana. There is no current record of how Babisa's life ended. Themis of Delphi, 2802 BCE. Themis is said by Roman and Greek historians to have been born at Delphos, Boeotia, Greece, and that her name was Themis and Anthemis, an initiated priestess of Artemis. Themis was said to be the daughter of the famous black Theban diviner and priest Tiresias and his high priestess wife Daphne. She is reputed to have prophesied before the destruction of Ethiopian Troy and to have written about Priam, the black king of Troy, and his main wife Hecuba. The way that these women, the way that being an oracle works is you're just channeling information, and it makes me think about people like I can't think of this woman's name, it's escaping me right now, but the author of The Matrix, and what else did she write? Ugh, I can't think of it, but the woman who wrote The Matrix, the black woman who wrote The Matrix, these women, these writers, the way we use media now as propaganda to manipulate the public, there were people who were using their art to express messages that were coming straight from the divine. That was one of the primary functions of art, to relay the messages coming straight from the divine. And some of these messages were prophetic. And these women were writing books, journals. I talk about this on Patreon, like keeping journals, keeping diaries, keeping memoirs, mementos for yourself or to pass down within your family, of the messages that you get throughout your life here, the dreams that you have, the journey. Your life's journey is worth being documented for self-exploration, especially if you're trying to heal or you're trying to really get rooted and connected to the earth. You're trying to get rooted and connected to your abundance. Writing your thoughts out and keeping a documentation of your dreams and what you're experiencing and signs and synchronicities and patterns and all these things, that is a form of channeling. That is a form of being a prophet. And these women were writing all of these books, channeling the information that they were getting from their conversations with the Great Mother and all the spirits that are connected to her, pantheon, and to the land, the spirits around us. They never teach us this part in history, because the way historians or history teachers and history scholars view this information as myth, because it has been revised so much that it doesn't make any damn sense. It doesn't, unless you sit there and put all of the pieces together. She is reputed to have prophesied before the destruction of Ethiopian Troy and to have written about Priam, the black king of Troy, and his main wife Hecuba, namely during the Trojan Wars, Priam's alliance of Paris and Helen, two ancient black provinces in Troy. There's typos in this. It is this Sybil that Homer is alleged to have also plagiarized her prophecies to write the Iliad. Themis was worshipped all throughout ancient Rome, where a statue was built in her honor. It was in province called Georges in Troy that the Themis was known as George Thean, and sculpture to her was built in the temple of Apollo. It was also in this city where coins were minted of her, alongside an engraving of the Sphinx. There is no current record of how Themis' life ended. Sembitha of Perseca, 2769 BCE, also known as Chaldea in Helleria. Her name is given by Franciscan monks as Sembetha. She is claimed by the Roman Catholic populace to be the first prophetess. Sembetha is said to be the daughter of the black Chaldean historian Boroso and her mother, Irimanta. The shrine location from which Sembetha came was a Mami shrine to Astarte. However, mention is made of Sembetha by Nicanor, Greek historian of Alexander the Great, in which her prophecies have been altered to have predicted the coming of Christian Savior, John the Baptist, and the death and crucifixion of his Savior. It is important to keep in mind that the punishment by crucifixion was originally a black Phoenician, Carthaginian, Canaanite practice, adopted centuries later by the Romans. I'm going to read that again. It is important to keep in mind that the punishment by crucifixion was originally a black Phoenician, Canaanite practice adopted centuries later by the Romans. Okay, these Sybils too were also African, and the subject of their prophecies were, as a rule, devoted to their own people and to their own priestly orders. Therefore, the above allegations by Nicanor had much of what Sembetha had originally prophesied, and to whom she was actually referring, had long been corrupted by the Roman populace. The Sybil prophetess Sembetha is claimed to have written 84 books of prophecy, now all allegedly destroyed. She is said to have lived a long time. There is no record of how or where is died. I think that means where she's buried. There's some typos in this. Sybil of Cumea, 600 to 700 BCE. No exact birth date has been given, but this Sybil prophetess is claimed to have been around during the time of the Black Roman legislature and King Numa Pompilus, who was also a priest of the water goddess Egeria. However, she is believed to be a different Sybil from the Sybil at Cumea in ancient Turkey. This Sybil of Cumea is of Samara, a small province in Campania, Italy. She was called Samaria or Chemita, but was said to have been born in Babylon. Samaria is said to be the daughter of a Berosus, the black historian who wrote the history of the Chaldeans. However, this might be a mere speculation because some accounts have Berosus to have lived between 330 to 260 BCE. Samaria is said to have lived in a cliff cavern on Mount Gars, several miles from the Cumea in Rome. Many Sybils came and went from this region, but not all were endowed with the gift of divination or prophecy. One Sybil named Diaphobe even allegedly lived to 110 years and remained enshrined in the cave. As did most heads of state, Roman Emperor Claudius recounts having visited Samaria after his ascendancy to the throne. According to him, before being permitted to visit the Sybil, I had to sacrifice a bullock and an ewe to Apollo and to Artemis, respectively. That's a bull and a sheep. Samaria is said to be the prophetess to have conducted Anais, or ritual, descent into hell. Ooh, that's them sacred ceremonies. Them plant ceremonies. The more likely scenario is that Samaria served as the ceremonial priestess who conducted the rites of the dead, so that Aeneas, who as a priest of Mami would have a successful voyage back to the world of the ancestors in the Catholic Mass of the Dead. They have a line which reads, Test David cum Siblia, which they attribute to Samaria. Pagan turned Christian Saint Justin tells us that Samaria used to ascend to some high place and teach the people. More importantly, it was this Sybil who first divided her prophecies by designating the nation epochs by metals. Roman poet Virgil, who is alleged to have actually seen the original books and even plagiarized some of her prophecies, claimed in his Aeneid that Samaria divided them into the age of iron, gold, bronze, etc. A prophetic book, which is now allegedly destroyed, and the credit for designating nations to metals is now given to the Christian prophet Daniel for the book of Daniel, and to St. John for the book of Revelation. The Romans credit Samaria with prophesying the birth of Julius Caesar and his nephew Augustus. The famous Black Agar diviner Navius speaks about Samaria in his book of the Punic Wars. There is no record of how or where Samaria died. Sybil of Turbentina. This one's really interesting. I think I may have mentioned this in not the last one, but the video previous to this. So the third reading. I think that picture is the whitewashed depiction of the Sybil of Turbentina. She is claimed to be a native of Tibur, a city outside of Rome. She was known by the name Albania. She prophesied during the reign of Augustus Caesar. The vision of the Black Madonna and Child is one he experienced while in a heathen temple before the invention of the Virgin Mary. The Black Madonna is depicted carrying a palm branch, which later became one of the emblematic symbols of the Western Christ. Albania was later worshipped as a divinity, where a shrine was built for her in a community near the Anus River. The shrine was, as were others, eventually seized by the Order of Catholic Observance of St. Francis and incorporated, as most of its religious attributions credited to the White Virgin Mary. There is no record of how or where Albumea died. The Sybil Agrippina. The Sybil Agrippina is said to have been a native Black Egyptian and was called Egyptia or Agrippa or Sanbera in Norsica. Nothing is known of this Sybil except that she was quite recent in history. Agrippa was merely referred to as the Sybil of Norsica. Norsica, a city of Pergia, Italy, Italy, is now a diocese. I don't know what that means. Diocese, a district under the pastoral care of a bishop in the Christian church. Okay. So Agrippa was merely referred to as the Sybil of Norsica. Norsica, a city in Pergia, Italy, is now a diocese. Is that it? Diocese. During the Inquisitions and persecutions of African traditionalists, Agrippa lived in a cave and still tried to maintain a tradition of worship and initiations to Mami. She was constantly mocked and ridiculed by the locals as insane and as one who copulated with serpents. By then, the papacy had succeeded in facilitating the downfall of the Sibyls, though through widespread defamation. There is no record of how or where Agrippa died. That's so sad. Priscilla, and Maximilla, 240 to 250 CE. These last two Sybil's are actually the ancient African foremothers and father to the modern day Black charismatic Baptists and Pentecostals. You grew up in the South. This section is for you so you can understand where the philosophies of the Baptists and Pentecostals came from. Because it is they, along with priests named Montanus, all natives of Phrygia, now Western Turkey, who first learned to adapt African spirits to the forced Western Christian paradigm in the mid-2nd century CE, because the Roman Imperial Church decided that after the ascension of Christ, the age of the apostles and the age of prophecy was over. They violently suppressed all African prophetic voices, especially those of the Sybil priestesses. See, stuff takes time. This stuff takes time. This stuff takes time. Like, these older traditions are so ritualistic. People don't recognize ritual because people are afraid of studying those things. But once you know what ritual is, you can see it in so many different things. And demonizing prophecy is what made these temples and churches convert to new dogma, because anybody could kind of become a part of the clergy. It was no longer something that had to be inherited, because they had usurped the original authorities in these temples. This group, as did other Africans, were still being born and called by their divinities, and thus founded the New Prophecy movement, in which to voice their divine utterances. Although dubbed as Christian heresy by the Roman Imperial Church, Montanus and the Sybil priestesses, undeterred, forged ahead. The patriarchal papal authorities, refusing to accept a Black woman's gift of prophecy, instead credited her divine utterances to Montanus, proclaiming that, behold, man is as a lyre, and I play upon him with a plectrum. Man sleeps, and I arouse him. Behold, it is the Lord who throws men's souls into ecstasy and gives them a heart. Gender code words such as man and Lord, that did not exist until the advent of patriarchy, are clearly edited versions of the Sybil's original prophecy. Which always made reference to the Divine Mother. Masculine pronouns were inserted by church officials to render them consistent with their own corrupted church doctrines. In spite of this, the Black Montanist movement quickly spread in the African and diaspora religious communities all throughout Europe, Asia, and North Africa. So afraid and alarmed at being exposed, Roman church officials haphazardly and routinely rounded these followers up and tried to exorcise the divine African spirits, now classified as demons, from them. When that didn't work, they simply had these followers excommunicated, accusing them of heresy. Expressing the general sentiment of the Roman papals and patricians against these African women, Roman theologian Hippolytus categorically denounced the Sybil's, claiming that They have learned more from these women than from the law and prophets and the gospels. But they magnify these wretched women above the apostles in every gift of grace, so that some of them presume to assert that there is in them something superior to Christ. These men were having temper tantrums. That's all this is. These men were upset that certain women, a lot of women, but these women specifically, the Sybil's and the other few male prophets, had this connection to the Great Mother that they weren't going to betray the Great Mother. They just weren't going to do it. They understood the consequence. They understood the consequence. When we betray the Great Mother, we betray the earth. Like all these things are connected. When you betray her, when you refuse to take care of her, when you neglect her, there are consequences. But she's the Great Mother, so she continues to take care of us without any expectation because she represents unconditional love. But she also represents not taking any shit. And the people, the priestesses and priests that were in these clergies that had to bend and assimilate because of new doctrine that was coming from these tyrannical leaders, still try to preserve their connection with the Great Mother because they understood that their power was connected to her and her pantheon, in acknowledging her. But they were still trying to listen to what he said. But they magnify these wretched women above the apostles in every gift of grace, so that some of them presume to assert that there is in them something superior to Christ, this Christ that they came up with, this Christ that they revised. This figure that they took, this figure of prophecy that they took and changed into something else, is now suddenly more superior than the Great Mother. And that's what they were complaining about. What angered imperial church officials the most was the audacity of the Sybil's to structure their church hierarchy in the original African matriarchal Sibs, and to elevate Eve, a disguise for Mami, above Adam. This spurred Greek theologian Eusebius, whom fueled with misogynist rage, to declare, "The Mountainists maintain a special reverence for Eve because she ate from the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden." See how things just come together? I made a statement about Eve and how I felt that the tree in the Garden of Eden and that whole story is just when the feminine mysteries or the dark mysteries of the mother was given to Adam. They acknowledged the sister of Moses as a prophetess in support of their practice of appointing women to the clergy. Women among them are bishops, presbyters, and the rest, as if there were no difference in nature. We're talking about Priscilla and Maximilla, a man and woman, both priest and priestess, who pretty much are the forefathers of Baptists and Pentecostals, because they were still putting the Great Mother on a pedestal, as we still do in church today. People just don't recognize it as that because the language has changed. Nonetheless, Hippolytus did convey that they, prophetess, preached the end of the world, were the first to introduce dietary restrictions such as fasts and festivals, meals of parched food, and repasts, fast of radishes, alleging that the Montanists have been instructed by women to do so. Montanists preached for men and women to leave their spouses and to prepare for the New Jerusalem, the second coming of Christ, and to anticipate for the end of the world. These New Jerusalem Montanists were referring to what was not the Jerusalem during the time of King David or Dud, preached by Roman and Jewish clerics, but rather the original Jerusalem, first built by the ancient Odus or Uds, Black Ethiopian Jews who originated out of ancient India and Afro-Syria. These particular sect worshiped the old Black Buddhist religion, which celebrated the divine African mother. The second coming, preached by Montanus, was referring to the 10th or 11th incarnation of the solar sun savior prophesied by the ancient Sybil's. However, these critical theological distinctions became blurred and completely lost as Roman and Jewish hegemony began to dominate the ancient world, and their relentless campaign of destroying the books, prophecies, traditions, and temples of the old African goddesses and replacing it with their exclusive religious propaganda. After Montanus' death, the Sybil's restructured the church and added their own scriptures and excluded the Western Christian version, which they believed to be fraudulent. They maintained a rigorous, legalistic moral code, discouraged second marriages, and encouraged martyrdom when threatened. Their charismatic church of transpossession and prophecy was so popular that the Afro-Roman theologian Tertullian left the Imperial Roman Church and went back to his ancestral homeland of Carthage and joined them, a nation where the religion quickly flourished. This deliberate act of cultural and religious militancy by Tertullian embarrassed the Roman Church and made it even harder for the imperial papal authorities to destroy the Montanist movement. Instead, the church papals simply chose to ignore them. Over the centuries, as patriarchal control and the suppression of women in Africa became standard cultural fare, the Montanist churches began to reflect this. More men and less female clergy were appointed, and it soon became simply another patriarchal religious sect in support of the Catholic Church in the current status quo. Whew. Let's see. We're gonna have to come back to this because I want to get to a good stopping point. So I feel like this is a good stopping point. We're on page 80. The final destruction of the Sybil prophecies and the dilemma of Rome and the Papal Church. That is where we will resume next time. You guys, I have some posts up on Patreon, some new posts that I got up there, and I'll make a statement about it to put on the community tab here. So I'm still available for readings, consultations. There's a blockbuster ritual coming up on the 31st, I want to say. And what else is there? I think that's it. That's all I can think of for now. I'm going to go rest my voice. because it's giving out. Thank you for anybody that joined me. Thank you for those of you that liked the video. If you're at the end of this video and you haven't liked the video, please give the video a thumbs up. Share it with those you feel like will benefit from this information, and also subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell, and honestly, the notification bell, I don't get notifications from certain people, and I have my notifications turned on for certain creators. So y'all just keep me in your thoughts, and I'm sure I'll pop up when you keep me in your thoughts, because that's how this shit works. I will see you all in the next reading. Bye bye.